I felt free in Norway. But when I came to England, everything was much more strict and closed. Completely different from what I was used to. Hello, I know that I just did a soft speaking video, but I felt like I needed to do another one because I have been thinking about me and who I am, why I am who I am, what made me me, basically. And the reason I've been thinking about this is that a few days ago I went outside, right? I went to buy groceries, and it was that time of day where the sun is just setting behind the mountains, so it's not dark, but it's dim. It's about that time of year as well, and basically all these things reminded me of my childhood. It reminded me of when I would be outside as a kid, past bedtime, where I was free, basically. But before I get into all that, I should preface by saying this is not going to be some personality test kind of thing, right? For those of you who do care and put any sort of weight into Myers-Briggs, I consistently get INTP, and there's a video in the description that I feel best describes me as an INTP. It is awesome, by the way, you should go check that out. This is more basically just remembering childhood memories and trying to see if we can kind of piece together why I have the personality today that I do. If you're like me, you don't like the idea that things that have happened to you are the reason you are the way you are. You know, it's kind of obvious that is the case, but you don't like to think that you're influenced by other things. You like to think that you are perfectly in control of your opinions and why you are the way you are, but it's obviously not entirely the case. Now, personally, as a kid, I was quite happy with playing outside. I don't go outside much these days. I stay inside all the time, but as a kid, that wasn't the case. As a kid, I was outside, I had fun, and I always stayed out till late. I remember, actually, my mother saying that I was the first one out and the last one in. And that was in winter time, because I was basically outside playing for longer. But I also remember me on the computer 5 hours straight playing Transport Tycoon. So, you know, I guess I can do both. Get you a man who can do both. But my point is, I liked being outside because it felt free. I was obviously a lot of the time out past bedtime, and on many occasions I remember being found by a sibling or even a parent basically telling me to go home, telling me that it's bedtime, and I always hated it. Now, a lot of kids do, right? So that's not so special. What is a little bit different though is I moved to England when I was 11, and I think that is the turning point in my life, basically, the one that solidified my personality, because I felt free in Norway, but when I came to England, everything was much more strict and closed, completely different from what I was used to. schools required you to wear a uniform, and they were surrounded by metal fences, whereas in Norway, the school I went to had no fence at all. You could just go out of the school at any, through any direction. There was no fences or walls. In England there are walls, fences, hedges, something or other. Everything is walled off everywhere. In Norway, gardens are often open and houses are detached all over, and they're kind of spread out. Everything is just more open. The landscape is less flat, so you have different elevation. The whole country, in how it runs, how it is, it just feels so much more free. So moving to a place that was so much more strict, so much more streamlined with row houses, so much less less free is the best way to put it. It made me miss what I had, because I didn't want to move in the first place. I liked Norway, and so moving to England basically made me overly attached to freedom and individuality, being able to be me, being able to be free. That is, I'm almost certain, after thinking about it, that the reason I am that way is because of that experience. So, from that point on, I would occasionally try to have fun in the same way that I did as a kid. I would make huts out of sticks and so on. A lot of the kids there would. But they were eventually taken down, or we weren't allowed to build them where we were. There's so many no trespassing signs everywhere for forests and so on. It wasn't as viable as a way of having fun. England is also a lot more dense in terms of population, so you can't really, or at least where I lived, you couldn't walk to any particular forest and have fun, and the ones you could walk to were quite small. I also remember adventuring, exploring, is what we called it, with another friend. We'd get on bikes and we'd just go exploring our town, going to places we hadn't been before, trying to find every nook and cranny of the city. So I know it by heart. The whole thing, I'm like every back alley I've been down. But that only goes so far. You can only do so much exploring before you know everything. So being limited in what I could do, in ways I could play, I became more and more a person who sat inside on the computers. My hobbies became more and more about just doing things that I could do on the computer instead. When I was 15, after having made music on the computer a little bit, when I was 15 I got my own computer. I got a Mac Mini with Logic Pro, and I would make music. I'd always been a fan of rhythm and sound in general, so being able to make music was cool. And that also added to, that was just another thing that I can now do inside. And so gradually my hobbies became more and more indoor hobbies. Game development is another one of those things. Since I was 14, I wanted to make games, basically. And there's another part of me that I also recognize exists, and that is I like being alone. And I think this is partly because I have a large family, and partly because my dad died when I was 13. When I grew up in Norway, we had a house with 8 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. It was 3 floors. massive view, basically free, open, lots of space, room for everyone. There were 12 kids, if you're wondering. Moving to England, we had a bungalow. We had 2 bedrooms. So the kids would sleep in either bedroom, and then my mum and dad would sleep in the living room. And that was a massive change. So growing up as a hormonal teenager with very limited space, and no matter which room you're in, there's also multiple other people in it. You could never escape, basically. Yeah, I hated that. So again, another thing that sort of contributed to me being alone by myself, doing things that didn't require social interaction. And the part about my dad dying is important because he worked with computers. So even though I would be an alone person, if I was going to do something on the computer, if I was going to explore my talents on the computer, then I could do that and then talk to my dad about it. I remember him setting up a website for me, and he would basically run it, but I would make animations on the computer and he would upload it. And I thought that was cool. And I have other family members who also have done things on the computer, you know, CGI and visual effects, that kind of thing. And he is super interested and super keen on getting them and nurturing that talent with them because he gets it, he understands. And so not having him there is, well, it was difficult and it is difficult. It sucks to not have a parent who gets you, who gets what you like, who understands what you like to do. And so when you don't feel like you can turn to a family member and talk to them about that kind of stuff, then, you know, you tend to keep to yourself again. And now that I think about it, I got my computer when I was 14. Late 14, or maybe just turned 15. It's hard to remember exactly. It was for Christmas, and my birthday's just before. So either I turned 14 or turned 15. Either way, not that important. So, when I developed these hobbies, these interests, these tendencies, when I got these values that I had, that obviously eventually starts to clash with other people. I didn't like being told what to do, ever, and I still don't. I like being me, and I will only meet the logical and minimum requirements for social interaction and meeting other people's standards. I will shower just enough to not be a nuisance around people, because there's not enough logical reasons for me to shower more often. I didn't get into the habit of brushing my teeth as a kid or teenager, partially because of laziness, but also partially because I figured, fuck it, by the time I need dental work, the technology to replace my teeth entirely will be so cheap that it wouldn't even matter. I was wrong, of course, but that was my thought pattern, basically. I wanted to do as little as possible to do with anyone else. I didn't give a shit about it, and so it didn't matter. Some of that has bit me in the ass. Most of it hasn't. But another consequence of that kind of mentality is you start to want to stay more and more on your own, and you question what you're doing all the time. So the part of me that was religious started to fade, because I wanted to dig into the Bible, I wanted to dig into the religion and find the more logical and principled side of it. And I might still be in the church today if they weren't so opposed to the idea of discussing religion from a logical perspective rather than just having faith. So many people wouldn't even talk to me if I didn't accept the Bible as the Word of God as is. And that was bizarre, because it's written by people. It can't possibly be the perfect Word of God. It just can't be, you know? There's so many different translations and so on that there has to be some inconsistencies, some... Anyway, the point is, I fell more and more away from that life, and that paired with me not having a clean room and me doing weird shit like ASMR eventually led to me no longer being welcome in the church and no longer being welcome at home. I had the choice though. I could stop making ASMR and change the way I was, and I could stay in the church, and I could also stay at home. But I chose not to, and that's why I still have my channel, but also why I became homeless. I'd rather be me and do what I want to do, instead of being told what to do and dictated around, and yeah. Because fuck that shit, basically. And the reason I made that choice, I realize, is because of my upbringing. Unintentionally, they brought up a kid that they would learn to disagree with pretty heavily and pretty strongly. Now, to sort of finish off then, this half-baked psychoanalysis of myself. I don't even know if it counts as that, but there's a couple of things that I've thought about, and that is, if I'm ever going to have kids, I want to think about the effects more of what they go through rather than how I treat them, you know, because how you treat a person isn't the only thing that affects them. I wasn't treated badly as an 11-year-old, but we moved, and that affected me, clearly, pretty strongly. And I also went through the experience of not having a parent who understood or was particularly interested in my talents, you know. My mother would nurture some of the music side of me, because everybody understands music, but game development and so on, she not only doesn't get, but disagrees with me doing it. You know, get a real job kind of thing. So, even if I don't get what my child wants to do, I need to try and understand. Because the way I was thinking about things before in terms of bringing up kids was mainly from the perspective of teaching them principles, not necessarily telling them what to think, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to control this kid. I want to teach them how to control themselves, and how to conduct themselves, and how to be in everyday life, how to take care of themselves from an early age, basically, and then leaving them to their own devices. But there is going to be a lot more than that involved. There's going to be where we live, when we move, how far away we move, you know, what kind of life changes is this individual, this tiny version of me going through, and, you know, even though it's difficult for me to find things interesting if I'm not interested, basically try to understand their interests from their perspective, so that they can have someone to talk to relate to, and so on. So they can become better at being social through that, you know, that interaction. So, it's a bit of a strange video, but maybe you found it interesting, and if you did, and you're still watching, cool, you can like it, or if you didn't, if you thought it was a bunch of bullshit, thanks for giving me the time of the day at least, and you can go ahead and dislike it, that's fine. Or do nothing. Anyway, I will see you guys in another video. And I hope you have a good night's sleep or a good day or whatever the fuck.